Hello everyone, welcome back to the Florida Relocation Guide YouTube channel. I am your host, Adam Hancock, and in today's video, I want to authentically attempt to break down some real valid concerns going on in Florida right now. We have a borderline cost of living crisis. I want to pull out even home prices beyond that. Insurance premiums, both on home ownership and auto. We have climate volatility, overcrowding, infrastructure strain, and more. But at the same time, these things are always a juxtaposition. The second half of the video, I want to quickly highlight some possible solutions or other things that are unique to Florida right now that potentially can't remove negativity but can balance it. Like any good argument, I think both sides going into that equation would help anyone trying to work through a meaningful decision. If you find it useful, please consider grabbing our new 2025 Sarasota, Florida Relocation Guide. I just updated it, so it's a quick PDF flip book, locals list, favorite places to live, restaurants, things to do, places to stay when you come in town, and more. We also have a great 30-day email. One of the best things you can do from the back of this channel, if you like any of these kind of videos, it's different than anything you can get here in an evergreen format. One email every 30 days is the only thing I hand write. It's in real time. We have new construction incentives, brand new releases, stuff that makes more sense on a 30-day loop. So please consider doing both of those, and without further ado, let's get started. Okay, let's kick off the first half of this video with undoubtedly one of the biggest primary concerns for people looking at moving to the state of Florida, and that is cost of living / just housing prices in general. Florida has always been a historical attractive place to move. I think in no small part due to net migration patterns, really, like the density of where people are moving from. You have Illinois, New Jersey, New York, parts of Canada, Washington, D.C. It gets even crazier if you consider the California, Washington states of the world. So even if Florida prices are increasing overall, just all the categories, as long as they're cheaper than these other states they're moving from, it's the perspective, it's the difference between the two that's remained attractive. And that's where, even with changes, it's been still an interesting place to live. Recent years, this has become much more challenging. I was reading a study even the other day that said Florida was recently ranked the 49th in affordability out of the 50 total states, making it one of the least affordable places to reside in the entire United States at the moment. You have categories like the home prices I mentioned, but high property taxes, insurance costs, that's all made it really hard in the last 24 to 36 months for the average middle-class family versus what they were accustomed to. You know, and it's not just exclusive to the home ownership category. Rent prices have also skyrocketed recently across the state of Florida, especially in the anchor cities like your Miami, Tampa, and Orlando's of the world, where working-class families are finding it hard to afford even the general housing that they've always done. Even to further back this point, another study that I was going through ranked Florida as the 5th most affected state by the cost of living crisis. So housing, utilities, and included even everyday necessities hitting many families really hard. And on top of all of that, you have homeowners insurance costs. You know, the hurricanes obviously, but even market instability has led to Floridians paying thousands more per year for homes that they already own, which has made budgeting, to say the least, more difficult, especially if you're on like a fixed income retiree. So with all that being said, Florida still may very well be fiscally attractive versus your Californias, New York, etc. in many, many ways. But issues like these that are all cropping up and kind of dominoing on top of each other have made it at least much more of a consideration for people planning their long-term goals. Okay, for point number 2, let's continue to beat the insurance drum for just a moment or two, and I want to start off with homeowners insurance. This is no doubt one of the biggest single financial concerns for current / future Floridians. Florida homeowners, right now when I'm speaking, pay roughly 3 times the national average for their annual insurance premiums, and it has consistently continued to rise. One of the biggest things that throws this all out of whack is replacement costs. So you have supply chain issues, labor maybe is even worse than the supply chain overall, and just the simple cost to build a new home, creating a lot of these deficits with the increased new home market as well, trying to fill the housing crisis needs. And the replacement costs during a storm have deemed to be extremely difficult to combat. Additionally, I'm sure as many of you have heard, some Florida insurers have decided to leave the state entirely, which limits options, and then scarcity, like any supply and demand market, is going to drive up the rest of the cost. And you know, these factors are just making Florida a much more difficult decision for a lot of folks. Now, the one thing I want to mention, just because of the timing of this particular video of when I'm recording, is that there has been a very recent governor-led push to decrease rates across the state. I've seen numbers as high as 5, 6, 7%. Now, this is going to affect rate, not direct premium, because a lot of factors go into that, but you should see a trickle down, hopefully, if this all goes through over the next few years, that there will be some relief, which could make things more interesting, to say the least. All right, and I want to switch gears for just a second and talk about car insurance before we hop to point number 3. So this is another category that Florida has historically had some of the highest insurance rates in the entire country. But, and not to make everything like a negative and then immediately a good, a strengths my weaknesses situation, but the reforms are also attacking this category. So while I think this is going to affect a little bit more of them not going way higher than necessarily them all of a sudden being cheaper than many other states, what it will do is hopefully add stability and certainty. And I think one of our biggest issues right now with people trying to figure this out is just the uncertainty of it. Is, am I going to make a move and then things are going to be materially different financially, lifestyle-wise, day-to-day than I had originally anticipated? And that's put the big proverbial pause button on people's decision-making, rightfully so, and hopefully that affects that. All right, number 3 is the always fun one of climate and hurricanes. Florida, we have always been known for our warm weather, we've been known for our beaches, but with that comes risks, like many of the beautiful coastal cities around the United States. And hurricanes have obviously always been a part of this thing. It's always been like an inherent risk. But in recent years, we've got hit, especially by a couple big ones. On top of that, like I mentioned earlier, they've hit areas that were not that typical, like 100-year hurricane events in Southwest Florida, which is just a deal breaker for a lot of people because it adds to the fragility and just the general thought process. Which is not that binary, but the general thought process of saying that I can't really go anywhere and escape these kind of very scary things, and I don't want to move my whole life there, and then have it shattered and have to kind of rebuild, and then the insurance and blah, 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 right? This is a domino kind of effect, and this is the same thing with like flooding. We've, I think a lot of the kind of like deep-rooted issue with the last few years has been the unusual aspect of like you have storms hitting areas that they haven't hit typically. You have flooding hitting non-flood zones. And again, these are very small pockets, but to be fair, it has made it look like, at least news-wise, that this is a widespread issue that is going to be recurring and unavoidable in the future. All right, my fourth and final point for the first half of this video, let's talk overcrowding and possible infrastructure strain. So I think there's a lot of good that comes with popularity in general, if anything. It's like a saturated market to me. If no one wanted to move to that state, no one wanted to go into that sector, there's probably a good reason for it. And with a crowd of people that are all trying to do one thing, when it comes to real estate and economics, you're going to have more jobs typically, more businesses, people trying to figure things out, the more stores and commercial amenities that come with that, and just some other general factors that may influence the net benefit of that economic health of that city or that state or whatever it may be. At the same time, you're going to generally, inevitably, get more traffic congestion. You're going to get overcrowded schools because maybe they didn't know they needed the schools at that time because, like a COVID sent way more people into the state than could be predicted. And other growing pains that are going to be related to that. And Florida, regardless of what's happening at any time, if you look at total moves, you're like 700,000-800,000 people moving to the state, albeit maybe 500,000 to 600,000 at the same time are moving out of the state. Regardless, Florida and Texas are always up on the top of the ins and the outs, the most people at any given time staying, 250 to 300,000 new residents a year. So every one of those like secret oases, like the seasides of the world, my hometown, like Siesta Key, of Lido, Longboat Key, Anna Maria Island at one point in time, Amelia Island, these special spots that people dreamed as their kind of like tranquil paradises, they're going to get popular and more people are going to come. You can't keep these things a secret. So there's going to be naturally a trade-off that exists with the goods and the bads of trying to choose a destination. Okay, now that we've talked about some of the possible concerns with living in the Sunshine State at the moment, let's combat that with some possible solutions or pros that at least will balance things out, make it interesting overall. The first of those being the new construction market at the moment. Over 1,300 actively building new construction communities right now in the state of Florida. Over 100 different home builders individually are spread across those. And then if you zoom in a little bit further, which that in general is pretty dense per capita. If you look around the United States and you think like some of these states you would think are just so much bigger, have so much more going on. New construction-wise, it's not always the case. There's a few states that absolutely dominate that, and that's Texas, that's Florida, it's California, Arizona. It's not across the board, and especially in a coastal state like that, it's even more unusual. You zoom in a little further, and they're not spread across every single city in the state. Even like the big ones like Miami. They are dwarfed by Sarasota, Tampa, Naples, Fort Myers. Southwest Florida dominates a lot of this. Stretch a little bit, you add Orlando and then grab Jacksonville, you kind of have it all. So it does a couple things for you. One is current code across the board, current standards, right? You have a brand new house, you have these brand new stucco-based stuff with in theory, the most stringent requirements. Same with the roofs, same with impact windows, etc. So house built 50 years ago, house built today, what should do better, really, right? Secondly, you have location. Where are they putting these? Take Lakewood Ranch, Florida, 12 to 20 miles one way, most neighborhoods from the bay, and then you have Barrier Island protecting that even further out to the Gulf. You have Welland Park. Welland Park is considered a new construction, like coastal-based thing, 18 to 22 minutes most neighborhoods from the water. So it's close, not right on top of it. Babcock Ranch is even a more innovative play to that. Not the most recent storms that hit, but the ones right before that hit, like the Sanibel, Captiva, northern Fort Myers area. Babcock Ranch exists in lower Punta Gorda, which is northern Fort Myers. It's considered that market. It's in that Lee, Collier County conversation for most people. They were one of the only places that lost no electricity, lost no water, because they built one themselves 40 minutes one way from the water, but they also they have a self-sustaining thing going on that is actually powered by FP&L, the power company. So that's interesting. Even like Tampa, you could go a bunch of examples, but all the suburbs, Brandon is east, Wesley Chapel is northeast, even West Chase isn't to the coastal county of Pinellas. So it gives people a lot of protection there. On top of that, I'll just throw one more thing in here is elevation plat. A lot of the flood insurance costs and the risk that's associated with it is not just how close these are to the water, but how low they lie. And new construction builders can control a lot of things, and every year they have maybe a little bit more control. And if you could build all the homes up a little higher, why wouldn't you? And it affects insurance premium heavily, but the reason it affects insurance premium is it affects your actual physical risk a lot more. So all of that's interesting, and that's not even to mention all the benefits that would come with just the master plan communal amenity environment they're doing. They're not building a lot of new neighborhoods randomly amongst the city anymore. They're master planning them, so you have downtowns, kids' sports, new schools that are being built, which makes it a lot less compelling or necessary to run into town for everything. And if your town's right on the water, all of this, to me, would make this one of the most compelling arguments to combat some of the negatives. All right, the second thing I wanted to mention in this video that I think is especially interesting is variety. One thing I would argue in a room with you about Florida that I have not come across, I don't know of any state that I think has a compelling thing to kind of devil's advocate that conversation, is that Florida is a place that a lot of people can be targeting similar things, very stereotypical things. I want sunny weather all year round. I want maybe no state income tax, coastal proximity, beaches, boating, whatever it may be. And there's not one option, there's not two options. You probably have 5, 6, 7, 8 realistic options to do similar things in different areas. Now, there's always a trade-off with that. But if you take that versus other options, right? Texas is a peacock. So you could probably throw coast out of the conversation completely, but say it was a compelling option. You're schools versus, and you're doing all this kind of thing. You have DFW versus Austin versus Houston versus San Antonio. One, they're nowhere near each other. Two, they're very different from each other. You're not really comparing like that. The more apt comparison is probably the Carolinas, Georgia, that area. You have Tybee Island, Savannah. You go to Charleston, South Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina. You move up that. Well, these states are super skinny. The Atlantic coast is to the right. And so if you love one of these, the problem is, and this is beyond even seasonality and all these kind of things, they're not going to be the same as Florida. But if you love one, there's not going to be a plan B, and there's not going to be a plan C, which the problem there exists if it doesn't quite work for you, what are you going to do? And the benefit to a buyer, especially of abundance, is exactly that, right? If there's not one option to choose, if there's several, then that's going to breed affordability, and that's going to breed maybe not more demand, or maybe not more supply than demand, but it's going to be a lot more of an even conversation. Say we're obsessed with Sarasota, Florida, Siesta Key, Lido Key, love that lifestyle, rightfully so. Well, and the prices are out of control, right? You're not buying a single family home for under 1.5, 1.6 miles, a million on the Barrier Islands anymore. Well, one thing you can immediately do is say, don't leave the town, just go 8, 9 miles. Go east a little bit, right? That's the same for Tampa, that's the same with Naples. But say none of that works. Tampa's too big, Naples doesn't work either. Well, go to the Atlantic coast and you're just chock full of options from St. Augustine down to before you get to Fort Lauderdale. I'm not saying any of the crazy things, not the heart of Ponte Vedra, not the heart of Miami. But you have Delray, Deerfield Beach, you have Melbourne, Vero Beach, really interesting towns, and these average prices are not $600,000. These towns are $350, $375, $400K, and you're right on the coast, you have a river, really, really interesting. And then you have peacocks like Amelia Island, you have Seaside, but even the Panhandle, you could keep going on and on and on here. You have Navarre Beach, Pensacola, the whole amount of beach town land, St. Joe's, that exists from 30A out to Panama City. As I say many times in this channel, from a buyer's perspective, more options are very rarely going to hurt you. where exclusivity and scarcity would. Okay, now that we've kind of looked at both sides of the equation, I would be curious of, what you guys personally think. There's always going to be an opinion-based layer here, but we've juxtaposed. We've talked about the scary climate mixed with the fragile housing and low-lying elevation plains. Well, you could live in a newer house up high 15 miles one way from the coast. We've talked about insurance premiums across the board and maybe overcrowding and infrastructure strain. But at the same time, maybe you could go to places where they're going hard after the current reforms when it comes to auto or homeowners insurance. You could also go to places that are near the coast, near the water, near the beaches, that are a lot more affordable and not everyone's targeting because they're going to those main 4 or 5. There's always going to be kind of a pendulum swing here. And this video is simply meant to not convolute things further, but to add as much information as I could think of while you have to work through a decision that you need to work through anyway. So I hope you found it that way. If you are someone that is still interested in moving to Florida, hopefully this video didn't ruin it for you, but if you are someone that's still interested in moving to Florida, you're somewhere in the process of working through that, stick around just for 2 minutes after this clip, and I can share some free things we have going on, but also some other ways we can help. All right, my friends, that is a wrap for today's edition of the Florida Relocation Guide, your smartest way to buy, sell, and/or invest across all of Southwest Florida. I was your host, Adam Hancock. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider subscribing to this channel. My goal is to release hopefully 100% of the Sundays and Wednesdays for the remaining balance of 2025. Which should give us a lot of opportunities to have some amazing content and try to add as much value as possible across Sarasota, Tampa / Naples, and subscribing just the best way to see what's coming next. Beyond that, a couple of housekeeping items. If you haven't already signed up for our 30-day email list, you're not on that, you haven't been receiving that, please reach out. We have a link in the description box below. You can email any of the contact information, anything like that. We'll make sure you're on it, and we'll try to send you the last one as well. The last day of every single month, it's the only email I handwrite. We only send one, no spam, bite-sized information, real consumable stuff, more real-time stuff that's on a 30-day loop. That's hard to do in evergreen videos like this. So this will be new construction incentives, like communities that are about to release, interesting things overall. I think that's a really nice asset if you like these videos at all. We also have a 2025 Sarasota, Florida relocation guide that we recently released, or updated rather. It's a flip book. You can download a PDF as well. It's a real locals list, favorite neighborhoods, things to do, places to eat, places to stay when you come in town for a visit, distances to other attractive cities if you reside in Sarasota as a homestead. So I think that's a cool one. Another quick link in the description box as well. And if I can assist you in any way in the real estate market, whether you're ready now, you're ready 2 years from now, we're not exclusive to relocation and new construction. Full service real estate brokerage, buying, selling, and/or investing. But we have a really interesting model of this information economics first thing, and our entire brokerage, entire team is based on the back of that. So I think it's a unique offering in a world of commoditized real estate offerings. So we're trying to add as much value as possible, especially if you are trying to relocate, where it can be not only stressful, but there can be a lot better ways to do it than not. And we have a lot of history and leverage when it comes to that world. So if I can assist you at all, call, text, email, contact form on the website, anything that you want to do. You can reference videos, ask questions based on that. So anything like that, I would love to if I could. And if you don't do any of that, I appreciate you guys even taking a few minutes of your precious time to consume my content. We'll see you on the next one.